The vaccine mandates start coming. What to look out for as the January 6th committee starts its work, and Alaska and Hawaii deliver the U.S. two big gold medals. Tuesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Tuesday, July 27th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hello, Carlo.
Jay Wags, how you doing today?
I'm okay. How's it going over there?
It's going. A lot of news today. A lot of news this summer, I guess.
Usually the summer is slow, but
Yeah.
not this summer, not 2021.
You remember last summer. Last summer was just absolute insanity. At least we're not in that level anymore.
Okay, it does feel, though, like the dam has started to break when it comes to vaccine mandates, at least for public employees. New York City is mandating municipal workers, this is everyone from teachers to cops to firefighters, that they get vaccinated or face regular COVID testing. California is doing the same for its 240,000 state employees. The Department of Veteran Affairs is mandating vaccines for its healthcare workers, the first federal agency to do so. Meanwhile, a group of nearly 60 medical groups have signed a letter calling for mandatory vaccinations in their industry, calling it, quote, the logical fulfillment of the ethical commitment of all healthcare workers.
Here to that. You know, we've been talking, Jill, sort of incessantly, I know, about vaccine mandates and incentives and the vaccine hesitancy. I know that it's maybe getting a little old for some people out there, but honestly, if what we say on this podcast helps if it helps convince a single person to get vaccinated who otherwise wouldn't, I consider our job done. I consider it worth it. So I was thinking about this a little bit this morning and last night, because I think that, you know, this vaccine hesitancy, whatever you want to call it, right, the people who are not getting vaccinated, it comes, like we've discussed, it comes in many forms, right? It's not just this political divide. It's not just this racial divide. It's also a rural-urban divide when you sort of look at the numbers. It's a young and old divide, which makes more sense, right, because old people are more at risk. There are some communities where it's like there's a really deep anti-vax pocket, like the yoga and wellness communities.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, people who are going to Equinox in Brooklyn and getting wheatgrass shots in the morning. There's a lot of it there.
What is it? Why? I don't. What?
That I couldn't tell you. I think that it's sort of inherent. I mean, these are communities that are very anti-vax to begin with. Not everybody by any stretch, but there are deep pockets in those communities. So I just want to break down some of the arguments against getting vaccinated. And I don't know, maybe you show this to somebody and it helps. I'm trying to do what we can here. So I put this together last night as I was rocking Franny to bed.
You're like, I'm not going to do nursery rhymes. Yes, I'm going to talk about vaccines.
I know, it's really depressing, isn't it?
Hopefully Franny will become a doctor with all
God.
of your talk.
From your lips, Jill. Okay, so the first thing is, we just don't know what's in these drugs. You hear that a lot, I think. Well, first of all, yes, you do, right? The ingredients are publicly posted online. It's hard to read. It's like, word alphabet soup if you don't really know what these things are, but still, it's out there. But more importantly, the irony with that question that drives me crazy is we have the most complete data set perhaps in human history for anything. Right? I mean, think about it. 165 and counting million people just in this country have gotten this vaccine, right? If there was anything in these shots that was causing harm to people beyond, a sore arm or feeling like they had the flu for a few hours or a day or two even, we'd have seen it by now, right? We have this massive data set. Well, we just don't know what the long-term side effects are going to be. This is another one you hear a lot. Like, is it possible that these vaccines are going to have some long-term side effects that none of us are going to know about for years to come? Well, of course, sure, it's possible. It's possible you're going to walk out the door and get struck by lightning today. But it's worth repeating, and I think this is getting lost a little bit. No vaccine in history has ever created an unintended side effect more than 2 months after the last dose. I'm going to say that again, and this is from Scripps Research. I didn't just pull this out of my butt. No vaccine in history has ever created an unintended side effect more than 2 months after its last dose. Not to mention, of course, that the very real, very unknown long-term side effects of long-term COVID, right?
I'm just going to jump in right there because
please.
as I'm seeing some of your notes here, I think that that's really important when it comes to vaccines, is that the side effects happen quickly.
Yes.
That's how they work.
Exactly.
So in terms of that, the thinking that like something's going to come in 5 years from now, that's just not, we've had vaccines for a century. That's just not how vaccines work.
Thank you for stressing that point, Jill. Appreciate it. Where was I? Oh, the other one, you know, I don't trust big pharma. I think you hear that a lot, right? Well, frankly, neither do I, right? I don't trust any company, nor should you. Companies exist to make money. They don't exist to care about you. But what would the incentive be for a company like Pfizer to create a vaccine that harmed people? I mean, just think about it in those terms. It's a public company, right? Same with Moderna. What do you think would happen to Pfizer's stock if it came out in the New York Times today that the company fudged the numbers on its clinical trials to get the vaccine approved, right? Pfizer would be in Chapter 7 by the weekend. It's just not in their interest to make a drug that's not extremely safe and effective. And then the other one is like, I think this is a lot of what you hear on social media is people saying, well, I heard a story about this guy or this lady who got vaccinated and then they dropped dead. Just when you see those stories or when you see people share those stories, throw it out. Just put it out of your mind palace immediately, right? Into the garbage. If you said that the cure to COVID was a Hershey's chocolate bar and 160 million people ate a Hershey's chocolate bar, some minuscule number of those people would die, right? Some would choke. So a couple of them would probably go into anaphylactic shock, not knowing that they were allergic to it. Some would eat the chocolate bar and then they would be protected and then they would die of a heart attack that was not causal. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I just think those are some of the arguments that you're hearing from across the spectrum, not just this political divide. And if it's helpful to send that to people, that little clip, I'm happy to have been of service.
Meanwhile, the New York Times is reporting that the FDA has asked Pfizer and Moderna to expand their ongoing vaccine clinical trials in young children in order to increase the chances of detecting potentially rare side effects. It is not clear if or how the expanded trials will affect the timeline for the vaccines to be authorized in kids under 12, although you would think that it would delay things. Pfizer had previously said that it expects to have the results for 5 to 11-year-olds by September, with results for younger ages to follow.
It sure does seem like it's going to delay things, though hopefully not, because we have got to get these things in the arms of kids before school, although it's probably already too late for that. I think school's starting in some parts of the country in the next couple of weeks, yeah. Also, sort of apropos of nothing, BioNTech, Pfizer's partner, they said yesterday that they're going to start trials for an mRNA vaccine for malaria next year. So we thought that this was coming. Now they're confirming it. I'll tell you what, there's not going to be any vaccine hesitancy in sub-Saharan Africa, where malaria still kills 400,000 people a year. But just shows you this mRNA platform, it's the beginning of something, right? It's really promising.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm friendly with my daughter's old pediatrician, and I've spoken to her about vaccines, and my daughter has food allergies, and I remember going down a rabbit hole being like, did the vaccines cause her food allergies and blah, blah, blah. And there's zero evidence of that. No, the answer is just like no.
Yeah.
She's actually there, and there's a lot of doctors that they have a hard time now even taking patients where their parents are such anti-vaxxers. She actually has said to me that she thinks that it's like a form of almost child abuse, but when parents are refusing to vaccinate their kids, and I don't know. I mean, like it's such a big issue, and the one thing that you say is like we don't know what's in these drugs. I'm not giggling, but I'm currently drinking a coffee with you know how I drink my coffee, my vanilla creamer. I can't pronounce any ingredient in there that I'm currently drinking. My husband and I joke, we literally call it poison. I stopped drinking it when I was pregnant because it was like, I can't, in good conscience, drink this, not knowing what it is. So think about all this stuff that we do put in our bodies without question, right? And here is something that has been tested, gone through the ringer.
Exactly.
Every doctor has taken it, besides for a handful. And when you were talking about kind of your list, going through that, That's what I'm thinking of as I'm sipping my
Right.
coffee
Yeah, no,
that
you're
is
absolutely
quite
right.
literally like filled with the most chemicals.
Right. Well, you know what I always think about in the same way? It's like people say like, oh, we don't know what's in it. It's like, well, when you go to the airport, you go through the Stargate machine that blasts God knows what into the body of you and your children. You don't know what that. No one knows what that thing is, right? But you still do it because you have to get on the plane.
It's a lot of, and I hate that argument because it's whataboutism, which I
Yeah.
don't attest to. But when you think about it, it's like to your point, we do actually know what's in these vaccines.
Right.
Okay. Let's move on. The Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot kicks off its first hearing today. The 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the panel want to hear from the police who defended the building that day. 4 of those cops are going to be delivering public testimony. 2 from the D.C. Metro Police Department, 2 from the Capitol Police. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, one of 2 Republicans on the panel, she's going to be giving an opening statement.
Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, he is the other Republican on this panel. He was one of the few, along with Cheney, to vote to impeach Trump the second time. By the way, GOP House Leader Kevin McCarthy yesterday calling these 2 quote-unquote Pelosi Republicans. So you can see that they are not making any friends by joining this panel, although they were basically already on the outs with their party anyway. Unlike typical congressional hearings that you get the partisan fireworks, they're not going to have that. Everyone is on this panel is like on the same page, like they want to get to the bottom of what happened that day. So I think you're probably going to see sort of a sober tone, and hopefully, hopefully we do get to the bottom of what happened that day.
I mean, I think the big question is what will we learn that we don't already know, and who's going to believe it? So just say the committee finds that the protesters stormed the Capitol as a direct result of President Trump's speech that day. Will Trump Republicans even believe it?
Of course not.
And vice versa, though. If it turns out after investigating that, you know what, the protesters not really influenced by President Trump, will Democrats believe it? Probably not. Today should be interesting, though. As we mentioned, the police officers who will be testifying were at the Capitol. So we've all seen that cell phone video, plenty of cell phone video,
Yeah.
and journalists have tried to piece it together. The New York Times did that really cool video montage. But the truth is, we're all kind of guessing. The police officers are actually going to be narrating it from their perspective. That's what the goal is today,
Right.
that they're going to provide a bit more insight. Because we see video, we assume it's something, but we don't actually know. But these officers who were there are going to be like, oh yes, this is when
Right.
X, Y, and Z. So it'll be fascinating.
The only thing is with a little bit of this is going to be CYA, right? Because one of the big failures here was there was a massive law enforcement failure, right? Whether it was the Capitol Police, DC Metro, how that building was how there were not more cops there, knowing that this crowd was there and angry, and that's one of the things that I'm interested in, sort of like the logistical stuff about like where were the police? How there were so many police protecting those buildings from during the other riots that last summer. Where the heck were they on this day? And I just think that some of these officers, it's in their best interest to, I don't know, shift the blame perhaps. We'll see.
President Biden has announced the U.S. will formally end the combat mission in Iraq by the end of the year. Speaking alongside the Iraqi Prime Minister at the White House, Biden said American troops in Iraq would shift to an advisory role, which they've already essentially been in since defeating ISIS. So this is basically a symbolic announcement that Biden made as a favor to the Iraqi Prime Minister, who's facing pressure at home, to declare an end to U.S. involvement in combat operations.
Yeah, I mean, raise your hand if you even knew that there were American combat troops in Iraq anymore, which speaks to a whole nother problem. The Pentagon saying that it will move an unspecified number of the 2,500 American boots on the ground in Iraq while keeping the rest in place to train the Iraqi military. Like you said, they're basically moving things around on paper, right? We're still going to have most of these troops in that country for whatever reason. That announcement also coming the day after the head of CENTCOM declined to rule out airstrikes on the Taliban in Afghanistan after the military completes its withdrawal from that front, which is in the process of happening. It basically already happened. But what this shows you is, we're doing this clean break in Afghanistan, right? We're getting the heck out, leaving literally with the lights, turning the lights off in the middle of the night. not so much in Iraq, which means that the administration, like past administrations, Republican and Democrat, view us as having some strategic interest in that country, as opposed to Afghanistan.
Let's do a little Olympics wrap. Naomi Osaka's medal hopes have been dashed. She was eliminated in the third round of the women's tennis singles in straight sets. Incredible. She is now out of competition. This is a huge blow for the host country to see their star athlete bow out so early. Yesterday was also a really big day for American women from outside the lower 48. Lydia Jacoby, she's a 17-year-old from Alaska. She stunned teammate Lily King. She won gold in the women's 100-meter breaststroke. And then Hawaii's Carissa Moore took home the gold in the first ever women's surfing competition.
How cool is that?
Love it.
I love when the Hawaiians and the Alaskans come out strong. Very cool. Today, it's all about the women's gymnastics team final. That event actually, I believe, starting as we speak. It's live this morning. It will be replayed in prime time on NBC tonight. If you do not want to be surprised, I highly recommend you stay off social media today. Turn the notifications off on your phone, because this is one of the big ones. Team USA actually came in a disappointing second in the qualifier. I'm not sure if we mentioned that yesterday. The Russians, I believe, bested the Americans in the qualifying round. But that doesn't really matter. They have a clean slate today. Simone Biles, let's do it.
Back to Naomi Osaka. She had 32 unforced errors in the match. And she was just really the face of the Tokyo Games.
Yeah.
She, of course, famously sat out Wimbledon and said that she was going to just take a break and focus on representing her home country in the games. She did speak after this match. She said she definitely felt like there was a lot of pressure for this. I think it's maybe because I haven't played in the Olympics before, and for the first year it was a bit much. I think I'm glad with how I played with taking that break that I had. Again, she withdrew from the French Open. She also sat out Wimbledon, just citing her mental health. Yeah,
and I mean, the Americans lost. We lost to France in basketball the other day. I mean, are you kidding me? I think that I say that because I think a lot of people, I think athletes are exhausted, right? I think everybody is so beat from this last year, competing and trying to just get through life. It's almost like you want to put an asterisk on these things, but.
Well, the NBA, I mean, look, the basketball is particularly, right, because they basically played two seasons back to back, and then the playoffs just finished.
Yeah,
so
they're all hurt.
You are talking about a team that has had zero time to rest.
Yeah.
If you have, though, been glued to these gymnastics events in Tokyo, you may have noticed the German women's team that has stood out for what they are not wearing. The customary high-cut leotards. We're talking about the gymnastics team. Their female gymnasts are wearing ankle-length unitards because they decided as a team to make the change as a way to protest the, quote, sexualization of women in the sport.
And also outside of the Olympics, I know we mentioned this last week, Norway's beach handball team, they were fined by their ruling body after ditching the bikini bottoms in favor of shorts. That was a planned protest that led to the singer Pink coming out this week saying that she would offer to pay each of those fines out of her own pocket in solidarity. You're definitely starting to see a change here, I think. And also, remember, this is the first Olympics since Larry Nassar, right? So I think that's an important point to remember. That creep. We didn't really know about the length of his crimes in Rio. So I think a lot of this is a response to that.
And finally, we told you on Friday that Kanye West's much awaited new album was dropping. 4 days later, still no Donda. Although Kanye has been spotted hanging out at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, where he's reportedly living in the locker rooms as he puts the final touches on this long-delayed record, now rumored to be coming on August 6th. So I wasn't crazy when I went to go look for it on Friday, and I'm like, I don't see it. Is it not out on Spotify? It's just apparently not out.
Yes, you were right, Jill. Did you see that picture of him in the stands at Mercedes-Benz Stadium watching the Atlanta United soccer game over the weekend? He's got he's wearing pantyhose over his head and like a red parka. I have to say, between Kanye and Jeff Bezos, amazing divorced dad energy this summer. These guys just major midlife crisis action.
Maybe, but I don't know. The thing that's weird about the album is that people have heard it. Like people,
Yeah.
it's sort of out. I mean, didn't they played
Well, they
it
did
and
a
it got
listening
reviewed?
party.
Right. So I guess what they look, Kanye West is famously a perfectionist. So I
Yes.
guess he's just like, wait, we got to fix this.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
got to. At a certain point, you just gotta.
Well, right, you gotta let it. Give it
Yeah,
to the,
you gotta
well,
let it go.
There is something interesting here, though, about just in the world of streaming, right? You can actually, if you remember, Kanye famously in one of his last records, he was editing songs while it was already out and putting them back out. So it's not like the old days where the record label's like, you got to put your album out today because we have to like literally print the CDs tomorrow. It's like you just send it to Spotify when it's ready and it comes out and you can edit it from there. It's pretty interesting.
I'm having flashbacks of when I used to be a field reporter, and you'd be just on deadline, and the
Yeah.
story wasn't perfect and it wasn't edited, but you're like, it has to air.
go.
Like they're in your intro.
Right.
Go. And I
Gotta
get
go
it.
out the door, yeah.
All right, that is what you need to know for Tuesday, July 27th.
All right, guys, enjoy the gymnastics. See you mañana.